For the purpose of this afternoon, however, I'm going to be Judy Aspinwall. Judy Aspinwall was born somewhere between the Little Satilla and the Altamahaw in 1950. I wasn't the only new thing on the rivers then. In 1954, we had the mill. At the same time, I was living on these rivers, not really aware of the mill, at least not yet. This is an homage to my Uncle Otto, and with appreciation to Janice Ray. Uncle Otto was a fisherman, everybody called him Toad. He lived on the banks of the Altamahaw, Georgia's great river road. In '54 he watched the mill rise up on the river's reach. They said the stench from the pipes and the stacks would put shoes on poor folks' feet. Does a river have to die to put shoes on poor folks' feet? Does the mill have to spew the stain and the stench so folks on the bank can eat? And then the river slowly died below the great mill's gates. The catfish, sturgeon, the crappie and shad succumbed to a slimy fate. Now Toad tried to speak to the river's life, but nobody hears a drunk. In a jail cell on a Sunday morn, he slashed away that hurt. My Uncle Toad was the finest fishing guide in the Altamahaw River swamp when he was sober. He wasn't always sober. Now, it wasn't so much that my Uncle Toad drank, but it was that he drank publicly. Why, everybody in the Altamahaw River drank. They just had all kinds of methods of keeping it hid. Some from their wives, some from their church, some from their customers. Why, my Uncle Hub did his drinking in a meat locker in his grocery store. So there were all kinds of ways to do it. But my Uncle Toad, he drank publicly. When he inevitably became the town drunk, that pillar of the Baptist church, my mother, planted herself firmly between me and him. So I never saw him except on the banks of the river, and that one Sunday morning. But we'll come back to that. On the banks of that river, we'd gather up in the afternoon, and my Uncle Toad would be welcome because he could be counted on to bring the fish. And he'd bring them cleaned. Nobody had to get their hands messed up to have some of those good fresh fish that had been swimming that morning. Now my daddy would show up with the river rice, and my Uncle Simon would show up with the barbecue, and then the women would come. And they'd have the peas, and they'd have the sweet corn, and they'd have the okra that had been in the garden that morning. And they'd have warm pound cake that they had wrapped up in a towel so it'd stay warm. My mama would bring a white dishpan full of banana pudding. And so I saw Toad on the river. Except for that one hot Sunday morning. A siren screamed. Sitting between my parents on a bench in the emergency room of Wayne County Hospital, I wondered if the fire in my throat would just get hotter and hotter, or if it would stop when the siren stopped. But because the siren didn't get any louder, the pain didn't get any worse either. It would only be so loud, and that was comforting. We had been in this room many times before when my throat was on fire. We always waited. I didn't know then that even though my mama worked for the Manhattan Shirt Company, people who drove old pickup trucks always waited, even if you were white. I leaned over and I studied our shoes, hoping that that pose would relieve the pain in my throat. Mama's peep toe pumps and Daddy's dress lace-ups, and then in between my saddle Oxfords, The black cinders would shine, because every night, every Saturday night, Daddy would take laces out of his shoes, and he'd shine his shoes, and he'd shine the black part of my saddle Oxfords. And then Mama would get out that white pasty stuff, and she'd knock all the scuffs off those shoes that I had picked up that week. Thinking of this ritual almost made me forget the fire in my throat. Not quite. I then attempted to concentrate on the brown plaid of my dress. I had a blue one exactly like it that I liked better, but Mama made me wear the brown one to even it out. Miss Elsie Dennison made both of them for me from the same pattern. And then the siren stopped. The room filled with running people, and the cart with a man lying on it. My father bolted toward the cart. My mother took off out the door like Moody's goose through the door swinging, pulling me after her. I had only a sideways look at the man on the rolling cart, and tube hanging from a pole, and arms wrapped up in white, and then there was red streaks on it. But I was just the right height of that rolling cart so I could look at it, and I could see the man whose eyes were closed. It was my Uncle Toad. I waited in the truck with Mama till Daddy came out. He looked real sad. And I knew better than to ask any questions. We didn't go back in the waiting room. We didn't even go to Sunday school. We didn't go to church that morning. We didn't go that night for choir practice either. We stayed at home. Nobody said much. Mother made a mixture of honey and some brown liquid. It didn't stop the fire, but there were no more sirens. My Uncle Toad didn't die that Sunday. At least, not completely. It's 50 years since the mill took the river and Uncle Toad's life, but the brew's still there and the river's still dead for 20 miles below those pipes. Now lots of folks are wearing real good shoes, cause the mill sits on that bank. But is it true that the stain and the stench are the price we pay for that? Does a river have to die to put shoes on poor folks' feet? Does the mill have to spew the stain and the stench so folks on the bank can eat? If the fish came back cause the folks at the mill cleaned the stain and the stench from the land, we could all walk prouder in our fine new shoes. Uncle Toad would drink to that. Hell, we'd all drink to that. Let's all drink to that.